Welcome to my channel.
And this is English Podcast Station.
Okay, so you're tuning into this deep dive because you're probably thinking about IELTS Writing Task 2.
Yeah.
And let's be real, that blank page and the pressure to come up with amazing ideas super fast,
Right.
it can be pretty overwhelming, especially when you're just starting out.
Yeah, and that's exactly who this deep dive is for.
Right.
You, the learner.
Yeah.
Our goal today is to equip you with some really practical techniques for generating relevant ideas for your IELTS Writing Task 2 essay.
Okay.
But not only that,
Right.
also for developing those first thoughts
Yeah.
into well-supported arguments.
Okay, cool. So,
We're kind of trying to give you a shortcut
right.
to feel more confident,
Yeah.
less overwhelmed
Right.
when that essay prompt suddenly appears.
Yeah, exactly. Because when it comes to IELTS Writing Task 2, you know, having those strong ideas,
Yeah.
it's not just like a bonus.
Right.
It really is the foundation
Yeah.
of a good essay. And the sources that we looked at for this, they really emphasize that.
Yeah. Like, for example, the quality of your ideas
Right.
directly impacts your score in task response,
Absolutely.
which is, how well you answer the question.
Yeah.
But also coherence and cohesion, which is like how well your essay flows.
How logically the ideas connect together.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what's really interesting?
Yeah.
Is that those ideas that you come up with,
Right.
those are your starting point for actually building arguments that are convincing to the examiner
Absolutely.
and showing them that you understand this topic.
the foundation.
Right. So if you're starting off with weak ideas,
Right.
or if they're not really relevant, it doesn't matter how good your vocabulary or your grammar is.
Exactly.
Like the rest of your essay is just,
He's going to suffer.
going to struggle.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about
Right.
hitting that score. It's also about just making sure that you are answering the question
Right.
that you've been given.
Exactly.
So those ideas that are relevant to the topic,
Yeah. That's what keeps you on track.
that's like a compass.
Right. It's like a compass that keeps your essay going in the right direction.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that a lot of learners struggle with is,
Yeah.
they start writing and then they're like, oh my gosh, I've run out of things to say.
Yeah, they hit a wall.
Yeah. So, making sure that you have those strong initial ideas is your best defense against that writer's block halfway through the essay.
Right. And so then the question becomes,
Right.
how do you actually move beyond just those couple of initial thoughts
Yeah.
and create a more substantial response? And all of the material we looked at highlighted that idea generation is really that first step
Right.
to expanding those initial thoughts and developing them.
Yeah, and the material that we looked at really pinpointed some common challenges for beginners.
Yeah.
Things like the fear of running out of ideas, the struggle to make sure those ideas are relevant to the question, the challenge of, you have a simple idea, but how do you make it more complex?
How do you develop it?
Right, exactly. And of course, that time pressure.
Yeah.
You only have so long to write the essay.
Always.
And then just like a lack of familiarity with some of these topics.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't know enough about the topic to have any ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what this deep dive is all about,
That's what we're here for.
is trying to give you some concrete strategies
Yeah.
to deal with these very issues.
Exactly.
So let's get into some actual techniques you can use,
Right.
starting with something that I'm sure you've heard of before, which is brainstorming.
Of course, yeah, brainstorming.
Right?
It's all about just getting those ideas out
Yeah.
without judgment.
Right.
So you just let your mind go wild and you jot down anything that comes to mind.
Right.
You could do this by yourself.
Yeah.
You could do it with a study partner.
Yeah.
But it's really about breaking through those mental blocks, getting over that initial hurdle of, I don't know what to say.
Right.
I have nothing to write.
So it's about quantity over quality at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. Quantity first.
Okay.
And then you can refine those ideas later.
Right. It's like casting a wide net.
Yeah. A big net.
You're not expecting to catch a fish with every single,
Right.
part of the net.
You just throw it out there and see what you get.
Right. But the more ideas you put down,
Yeah.
the higher chance that you'll find some good ones.
Exactly.
And then another approach that's a bit more visually structured is mind mapping.
Right. Mind mapping is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it helps you see
Okay.
your ideas visually.
Right.
So you start with your main topic in the center,
Okay.
and then you branch out with related ideas.
Right. Right.
And you can start to see how all of these different ideas connect to each other.
Yeah.
And that helps you build a more coherent and cohesive argument.
So you can start to plan out your essay
Exactly.
visually.
Yeah.
So you can see the relationships between the ideas.
Right.
And it's a really nice way, I think, to go from kind of these initial scattered thoughts
Right.
to something more structured.
Absolutely.
Now, another technique that I think is really helpful is the 5 W's and 1 H method.
Oh, yeah. This is a classic.
And it's something that's actually used a lot in journalism,
Right.
but it can be really useful
Yeah.
for IELTS Writing Task too.
So that's who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Exactly.
And this is a really structured approach
Yeah.
to really thinking about the topic
Okay.
and getting beyond those surface level ideas.
Right.
So it really helps you
Yeah.
come up with more comprehensive
Okay.
and, more importantly, more relevant ideas. And it addresses that challenge
Right.
of staying focused on the question.
So you don't go off topic.
Exactly.
Okay. And because it's so structured,
Yeah.
you know, it can be helpful when you're just feeling stuck.
Right. If you don't know where to begin,
Yeah.
start with who, what, when, why, how.
It's like a built-in prompt system
Exactly.
to get you thinking in the right direction.
Yeah.
Another technique that I think is really important
Okay.
to consider
Yeah.
is thinking from different perspectives.
Yeah. This is a good one.
So this means like actually trying to see the issue
Right.
from the viewpoint of, you know,
Debate different groups of people.
different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right.
So, for instance, if the topic is about technology and education,
Right.
you might consider how students feel about this,
Right.
how teachers feel about this, how parents feel about this,
Progressive matters.
policymakers. Right. Exactly.
So you're really looking at it from all sides.
Yeah. And what's cool about this is it gives you this like more well-rounded understanding.
Absolutely a more nuanced understanding.
Right. And it shows that you're thinking critically,
Right. It shows sophisticated thinking.
which is really important for the IELTS exam.
Yeah, they want to see that you can think critically.
And it also leads to just more insightful arguments
Yeah.
because they're not one-dimensional.
Right.
You're looking at it from, all angles.
You're not just looking at it from your own perspective.
Right. And finally, let's talk about the technique
Okay.
of analyzing cause and effect.
Oh yeah, cause and effect.
So this is really about, digging into the reasons why something is happening.
Right. Why is this happening?
And then also, what are the possible consequences or outcomes
The effects.
of that situation.
Yeah.
So if you can identify the underlying causes of a problem and think about what the effects might be,
Yeah.
you can really start to develop arguments that have depth.
Right. And logical reasoning.
And that's so important for
Yeah.
IELTS.
Because you're not just stating opinions, you're providing a logical basis for your arguments.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives your essay a backbone.
Yeah. You're showing the examiner that you can think critically
Right.
and that you can understand.
The relationship between different ideas. Exactly. So we've talked about a few techniques for generating those initial ideas,
Yeah.
which is a great start. But as we've seen in our sources, that's just the beginning.
It is the first step.
Yeah, you need to take those ideas and develop them.
Right.
And you need to support them.
Exactly.
So a one-sentence idea, that's not going to be enough.
It needs more.
Yeah. You need to expand on it.
Yeah, you've got to develop those points.
Give more details and evidence.
Give the reader something to hold on to.
And our sources really emphasize
Yeah.
the importance of providing concrete examples
Oh, yeah. Examples are crucial.
and evidence.
Evidence to support your claims.
Right, because examples
Yeah.
really take those abstract statements
Yeah.
and they make them something real.
They ground them in reality.
Right, they make it something that the reader can understand
Absolutely.
and believe.
Yeah.
And our sources really highlighted that, giving those specific examples
Yeah.
adds a lot of credibility to your arguments.
Shows the examiner that you're not just talking.
Right.
You actually know what you're talking about.
You've got evidence to support your claims.
Right.
Like, think about it. If you say, exercise is good for you,
Oh,
that's pretty weak, right?
it's a very general statement.
But if you follow that up with,
Yeah.
studies have shown that regular exercise can reduce the risk of heart disease.
Okay. Now you're talking.
That's okay, I'm listening.
That's a good example.
Right. And also, that process of actually looking for an example can help you further develop your idea.
Okay.
Because you're like, okay, what example can I give?
Right.
And then you start thinking about it more deeply.
Yeah. You start to think about it more specifically.
Right. And our sources actually said, examples do so much more
They do.
than just, provide support.
Right.
They help you clarify your points.
Right.
They add depth to your arguments.
They make them more substantial.
They make them more persuasive and they make them more convincing.
Yeah.
It's like saying, here's my point.
Here's my argument.
And here's why it actually matters.
Yeah, and here's how it connects to the real world.
Exactly. And another technique for expanding on those ideas is hypothetical scenarios.
Oh, yeah. What if situation?
Right. So you're creating this plausible situation.
Right. It's not necessarily a real example.
Yeah. But it can be really effective.
It can.
In making your argument more relatable and helping the reader understand the potential consequences.
Or the potential implications.
All right. So it kind of paints a picture for the examiner, and it makes those abstract points feel more concrete.
It helps them visualize it.
Right. And then we also have the technique of comparing and contrasting.
Yeah. This is about looking at the similarities.
And differences in different ideas.
Right. Or different perspectives.
And when you do this, you're showing your analytical skill.
Yeah. You're showing that you can think deeply about the topic.
Yeah. And it leads to a more comprehensive discussion.
You're not just looking at one side.
Right. And by exploring those, those complexities, you're able to take that initial idea and really develop it into something much more detailed.
And thoughtful.
And then another really important aspect of developing your ideas is to consider and develop counter arguments.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Which sounds a little bit counterintuitive.
Right.
But it can actually make your essay much stronger.
Absolutely.
Because you're acknowledging and addressing the opposite point of view.
The opposing arguments.
So it shows that you've really thought about it.
You've considered all sides.
From multiple angles, and that you can still make a compelling case for your own position.
Exactly.
And this shows that you have a balanced approach.
It shows critical thinking.
Which is very important for IELTS.
Yeah. They want to see that you can think critically.
Okay, and then finally, let's talk about the importance of creating logical chains of reasoning.
Ah, yes. This is all about flow.
Yes.
Making sure your ideas flow logically.
So your ideas need to flow logically.
Bring one to the next.
One to the next.
Each point should build upon the previous one. And, not just in each paragraph, but throughout the entire essay.
So it's like you're constructing this argument.
Exactly. It's like building a case.
Right. And each point leads to the next one.
Yeah. And ultimately leads to your conclusion.
And this makes it much easier for the examiner to follow.
They can follow your train of thought.
Right. And speaking of following, it's really important to have a good base of topical knowledge.
Oh, yeah. Topical knowledge is crucial.
So underpinning all of these techniques is that importance of staying informed.
Yeah, staying up to date.
About current events and global issues.
Yeah, reading the news.
Right, and our sources really emphasize how this can be so beneficial.
It can.
For your IELTS writing task, too.
So firstly, it helps you generate ideas that are relevant. And insightful.
So if you know what's going on in the world.
If you're familiar with current events.
You'll have much more to draw on.
Yeah, you'll have a bigger pool of information.
Right, and you'll be able to, come up with those specific and relevant points.
Absolutely.
And what's also really interesting is having that topical knowledge helps you develop more profound,
deeper,
and nuanced arguments.
Yeah.
So instead of just relying on general statements, you can bring in that deeper understanding and offer more sophisticated perspectives.
You can provide more insight.
And this goes back to providing concrete examples. If you know about these global issues, you'll have more real-world examples to use.
You'll have a wider range of examples.
Right, and that will make your arguments much more persuasive.
It will also help you build your vocabulary.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Because you'll be exposed to more sophisticated language.
And that's really important for the lexical resource.
It's part of your IELTS score.
Yeah.
And then also, the more you engage with different topics, the more you're going to expand your vocabulary in general.
Naturally.
And that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
When you're writing your essay.
Especially if you're familiar with the topic.
Yeah. And if you have a broad understanding of current events, you're more prepared for.
A wider range of questions.
A wider range of questions.
Yeah.
You're less likely to be thrown off.
By something you've never heard of.
By something you've never heard of.
Right.
Which is good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And I think most importantly,
yeah,
being knowledgeable about current events, it demonstrates that critical thinking to the examiners.
It shows them that you are engaged with the world.
Right.
You're not just living in a bubble.
And you can form your own opinions.
Right.
Based on what's actually happening.
Exactly.
So now you've generated
Right.
these amazing ideas.
Yeah.
You've developed them.
We've got them all laid out.
You've got evidence and examples, but now you have to structure them.
Oh, yes. Structure is key.
Because if you just kind of throw them all in there,
Yeah. If it's disorganized,
it's going to be really hard for the examiner to follow.
and they're not going to be able to appreciate your idea.
Right. So the first step,
Yeah.
as highlighted by our sources,
Yes.
is to create a plan
A plan
before you start writing.
before you put pen to paper.
So just take a few minutes to
Yeah.
jot down your main points.
Write down your key ideas.
And think about the order
Yeah. How are you going to present them?
you're going to present them.
In what order?
And this will save you so much time
It will.
and mental energy later on.
You'll be so glad you did it.
Because it gives you a roadmap.
Yeah. A roadmap for your essay.
And then after that, it's really important to organize those ideas
Okay.
into paragraphs.
Right.
With each paragraph
Ah, boy.
focusing on a single idea.
Right. One main idea per paragraph.
One main idea per paragraph.
That's the key.
This creates that clarity
And it makes it easier to follow.
for the reader.
Absolutely.
And then the first sentence of each paragraph
Yeah.
should be your topic sentence.
Ah, yes, the topic sentence.
And that clearly states
It tells the reader
what the main idea of that paragraph is.
what to expect.
So it's kind of like a signpost
Exactly.
to the reader.
Letting them know what's coming up.
So after that topic sentence,
Yeah.
you need to develop that main idea
Right.
with supporting details.
Yeah. With examples and evidence,
Examples, evidence.
as we talked about earlier.
Just like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And then to make sure that those paragraphs flow nicely,
Right.
you need to use
Transition words.
transition words and phrases. So
Yeah.
things like however, therefore, in addition, for example.
On the other hand,
On the other hand,
all those good linking words,
right, and those are really important
They-
to create that cohesion in your writing.
they're the glue that holds it all together.
Right, and then it's not just about individual paragraphs. You also need to think about the overall
Yeah, the big picture.
logical progression
Yeah.
of your arguments.
Right.
So each point should build upon the previous one,
Like a chain.
leading to your conclusion.
Yeah, a logical chain.
And then, of course, you want to follow
Mm-hmm.
that standard essay structure.
Yeah, the tried and true structure.
So you've got your introduction with your thesis statement.
Right.
Then you've got your body paragraph.
Supporting paragraphs.
And then your conclusion,
Wrap it all up
which summarizes your main point.
and restates your thesis.
Exactly. So for those of you who are just starting out,
Yeah.
what are some practical things that you can do
Okay.
to implement all of these techniques?
So I think a really good place to start
Yeah.
is just practicing brainstorming
Okay.
on some really simple everyday topics
Right.
so you can get used to that process of generating ideas.
Without the pressure of the exam.
Yeah, just for fun.
And then try applying that 5 W's and 1 H method
Yes.
to some practice questions.
Yes.
You know, it might feel a bit mechanical at first,
It might.
but it's a really good way
Or it works.
to make sure that you're considering all the angles.
Yeah.
And another really practical tip
Yeah.
is to try to find at least one
Yeah.
good, clear example to
Exactly.
support each of your main ideas.
Yeah, because a good example can really make your point stronger.
Right. And to build up that topical knowledge,
Yeah.
just start reading news headlines
Yeah.
regularly.
You don't have to become an
You
expert.
don't have to read like every single article.
Just get a general sense of what's going on
Yeah, exactly.
in the world.
And then before you even start writing a full essay,
Okay.
just create a simple outline
Yeah.
that includes your topic sentences.
Your topic sentences.
This will help you structure your thoughts
It'll help you plan the flow of your argument.
before you actually start writing the whole thing.
It's like creating a blueprint.
Exactly. And it can really prevent you from
Yeah.
getting lost or going off topic.
Going off on a tangent.
So to recap everything,
Yeah.
generating those ideas and developing them, they're really the building blocks
They are.
for success in IELTS Writing Task 2.
Absolutely.
And these are all skills that you can learn and develop
And they get better with practice.
with practice.
Yeah.
So it's really encouraging, I think, to
Yeah.
know that if you focus on these foundational skills,
Right.
like generating relevant ideas
Yeah.
and supporting them with examples,
And logical reasoning.
you can approach the IELTS Writing Task 2
Yep.
with much more confidence.
With less fear.
Right.
And you'll be able to express yourself more clearly.
So now that you have all these tools
Yeah.
and these strategies in your toolkit, What's one IELTS writing topic that you're now
That you're excited to try.
curious to explore further
Yeah.
using these techniques?
That's a great question to think about.
Right, and we really encourage you to
Yeah.
take these strategies,
Yeah.
experiment with them,
Try them out.
practice them, and remember that consistent effort and dedicated practice
Practice makes perfect.
is what's going to lead to improvement
Absolutely.
in your IELTS writing task 2.
Keep practicing,
Keep practicing.
and you'll see the results.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us.